The house in Fayetteville stood unnervingly quiet that June morning, the kind of silence that clings to the walls even before anyone steps inside. Officers approached the front door slowly, already sensing that whatever waited for them wasn't going to be simple. A neighbor had called in a welfare check after Chris Benoit, one of the most recognizable figures in professional wrestling, failed to show up for a pay-per-view event. Messages from WWE staff had gone unanswered. So had messages from friends. Benoit missing a show was unheard of, and the longer the silence stretched, the more unsettling it grew. Inside the house, the air felt still and heavy. There were no signs of a struggle on the ground floor, no overturned furniture or broken glass. It looked at first glance like any other suburban home. But as the officers moved down the hall, the atmosphere shifted. The place felt abandoned, yet not in the way of a spontaneous trip or a forgotten appointment. Something colder lingered in the space. They walked past framed photos on the walls, family portraits, championship belts, the familiar posed smiles of a man whose public life seemed larger than anything contained in a 3-bedroom home in Georgia. They found Nancy Benoit first. She was in the upstairs bedroom, wrapped in a blanket, her body bound, with bruising around her neck that left little question about how she died. There were no signs she had fought back. No overturned furniture, no defensive wounds nearby. Everything about the room said that her final moments had been controlled, deliberate, and quiet. Officers paused, taking in the scene as the weight of what they were dealing with settled over them. Then they found Daniel, the Benoit's 7-year-old son. His bedroom was tidy, the blinds pulled halfway shut, and toys lined neatly on the shelves. He was lying in bed as though someone had tucked him in, but he was already gone. The method matched Nancy's. There were no marks on him except the fatal pressure to his neck. A Bible lay beside his body, placed there intentionally. The officers radioed for detectives. A crime scene team was mobilized within minutes. Word began to circulate through law enforcement channels that they were no longer dealing with a missing person concern. This was a double homicide with the primary suspect unaccounted for. They found Chris last. He was in the home gym downstairs, slumped on the floor near a weight machine. A cord from the equipment had been looped and anchored in a way that made his cause of death unmistakable. It was suicide. A bottle of wine lay open nearby. Another Bible was placed next to him. The house had gone from silent to suffocating as investigators absorbed what was now clear. Over the course of a weekend, Benoit had killed his wife, killed his son, and then taken his own life. The timeline came together slowly, piece by piece. Autopsy results, text messages, phone records, and internet searches filled in the details. Nancy had been killed first, likely on Friday. Daniel was killed the following day. Chris moved through the home for nearly another full day before ending his life sometime late Sunday. It wasn't a moment of uncontrollable violence. It was a sequence of deliberate acts stretched over nearly 48 hours. Inside the kitchen, detectives found opened bottles of wine and half-eaten food. There were text messages Benoit had sent to co-workers, giving them cryptic updates about his address and the condition of his dogs. He never sent direct confessions. Instead, he sent fragments that hinted at a man preparing for the discovery of a crime scene rather than attempting to stop one from unfolding. His search history showed inquiries about the most painless method of suicide. In the gym, the equipment had been rearranged to support the method he ultimately used. The wrestling world was shaken almost instantly. At first, before anyone understood what had happened, WWE aired a tribute show to Benoit, treating him as a fallen star whose sudden death was unexplained. But within hours of the police press conference, everything changed. The tribute was pulled from re-airings. His name was removed from promotional materials, video packages, and merchandise. Storylines referencing him were erased. For a company that had once celebrated him as one of the greatest in-ring performers of his generation, The reversal was immediate and absolute. Investigators began looking deeper into Benoit's mental and physical condition in the months leading up to the killings. Rumors about steroid use had circulated for years, but after toxicology results came back, they found elevated testosterone consistent with supplementation, but not levels associated with sudden, uncontrollable rage. What they did uncover was far more concerning: signs of severe chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, a degenerative brain condition caused by repeated head trauma. Experts who examined his brain tissue said the damage resembled that of an elderly patient with advanced dementia. It raised the question of how much control Benoit may have had over his state of mind in the final days of his life, though it could never excuse what he had done. Family members of Nancy Benoit spoke publicly about their grief, emphasizing that explanations about brain injuries or mental health struggles could not change the reality that Nancy and Daniel lost their lives. They wanted the focus on the victims, not the man who had caused their deaths. Friends who had known Chris for years described him as quiet and disciplined, even gentle outside the ring. But nearly all of them acknowledged that he had been withdrawing socially. He seemed fatigued, distracted, and increasingly consumed by pressure and isolation. None imagined the outcome would be this violent, this irreversible. As the investigation closed, detectives confirmed there were no signs of outside involvement. No forced entry, no unknown DNA, no indication anyone but Chris Benoit was responsible. The case was officially ruled a murder-suicide. The community around the family struggled to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the evidence spread across 3 rooms of a quiet Georgia home. What remained were shattered lives, 2 victims whose futures were stolen, and a third whose final acts destroyed not only his own legacy, but the trust of everyone who had supported him. Years later, the Benoit case remains one of the darkest events in professional wrestling history. It changed policies, sparked conversations about brain trauma and mental health, and left a scar that fans, performers, and families still feel. But at the center of it all were 2 people whose lives ended violently and without reason, and a 7-year-old boy who never understood what was happening around him. It was a tragedy carried out behind closed doors, discovered only when it was far too late to save anyone inside. Thank you for listening to Homicide Files. Subscribe for more true crime stories.